long-standing policy banning open carry in the Capitol.
All right, that's just crazy. I mean, we're just talking about RFK Jr. This is madness. Open carry in Washington, D.C. is a threat to Republicans, Democrats, every public servant. It's menacing. It makes police officers' job that much harder in the nation's capital.
Chilling.
This is insanity.
At the same time that we're having this big debate about crime in Washington, D.C., where everyone's worried about violent crime in Washington, D.C., at the same time we're sending National Guard into D.C. We're going to also have open carry.
People can walk around with AR-15s.
Bonkers.
It is bonkers. This is insanity.
Federal prosecutors, they will no longer bring felony charges against people for possessing rifles or shotguns in the district.
Do people in the White House want to walk around outside the White House and have people carrying AR-15s or shotguns?
Right.
Of course, there will be around some of the federal buildings, there'll be different rules that will apply, right? Secret Service will step in. They will not be allowed to carry around a shotgun or anything else nearby.
What about on the mall?
But that's just it.
Right.
But it extends beyond those barriers. This is so poorly thought out here. It says at worst, violators could face a misdemeanor charge for illegally possessing an unregistered firearm. Pirro said in a statement that the change is based on the guidance from the DOJ and Officer of the Solicitor General, and she claims conforms with 2 Supreme Court decisions on gun rights.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. This is insanity. This isn't. At the same time, you're trying to make Washington, D.C. a safer place. You're telling freaks all over the country, come to Washington, D.C. If you have a problem with people on either side, walk around with an AR-15 or a shotgun, and nothing bad's going to happen to you.
And every big city police chief will tell you their number one problem is guns, whether that's New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, or some of those cities down south.
It's been the problem in Washington, D.C.
Certainly
it's been the problem in Chicago.
So joining us now, president of Brady United Against Gun Violence, Chris Brown. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. In an op-ed that you wrote for the Washington Post with this headline, Jeanine Pirro's refusal to prosecute gun crimes endangers us all, you write in part this. This reversal is antithetical to public safety, sows confusion among gun owners and law enforcement alike, and increases the risk and lethality of gun violence. It's especially dangerous for D.C., which faces unique security concerns as our nation's capital. We already have about 2,000 armed federal troops patrolling the nation's capital, many of them from out of state and operating in an unfamiliar environment. Adding armed civilians without knowing whether they will be prosecuted for carrying in public creates additional risk and a feeling of fear and intimidation. Chris, certainly the sense around the table is that we agree with that. Tell us more as to why you believe this is such a bad idea.
Well, thanks for having me. And, the remarks that were made earlier really cover it. For law enforcement, for individuals walking around D.C. already in effectively a police state, for elected officials, the presence of armed individuals who are carrying long guns, assault-style weapons in the mix is a highly dangerous situation. And look, we've had experience with this in Washington, D.C. It happened on January 6th. Mm-hmm. And the reason that January 6th, frankly, was not a complete bloodbath is because D.C. had very strict laws in place about open carry of firearms. I live right next to Washington, D.C., in Arlington, Virginia. All of the indictments that came out for those who participated in January 6th showed there were huge caches of firearms in places like Arlington, Virginia, in Maryland, because they were kept away from the district because they knew open carry was illegal. So we have past evidence of what having the restrictions on open carry means. Today, now, we have over 2,200 National Guard troops walking around. It is very hard to discern a good guy with a gun from a bad guy with a gun. So it's a cocktail, a recipe for disaster. And let's be clear. Jeanine Pirro's statement here is made in response to groups like Gun Owners of America concerned about crackdowns that the National Guard is making in D.C. and saying, well, what does this mean, recovering guns? In response to that, Jeanine Pirro said, oh, don't worry. Open carry is fine, which when you're coming from a top prosecutor, what that means is an invitation for individuals intent on doing harm to come into our nation's capital and potentially do that harm, making law enforcement making it much more dangerous for every single person in Washington, D.C., including our elected officials.
And what elected official in America has seen personally the danger of guns in political settings more than Donald Trump during the campaign? A couple of times. And by the way, you're talking about making Washington, D.C. safer. I remember I was having a debate with a guy that was like an absolutist on guns. And after Uvalde, he's like, well, you know, Mao and Stalin and what took away guns and then they took over the country. I said, yeah, so you're saying we need to go the other way, where outside of the elementary school in Uvalde, you had like 200 law enforcement officers that were outgunned by one freak inside with an AR-15 he was able to walk into a store and get. That's the America you want? That our law enforcement officers are outgunned? And now Jeanine Pirro is saying, come to Washington, D.C., open carry your AR-15s and your shotguns. And what does that do but make Washington less safe?
Preparing for the next January 6th to be more effective?
The worst part is, you know, John, you made the point that, you know, there'll be areas likely where they'll say you can't have open carry, whether that's on the mall or, you know, I want to know, walk into Union Station and people are going to be walking around with AR-15s. I hope not. But by saying this, you confuse the issue as to what's an area that's going to be considered, okay, what's not. And so by default, even if you think you put in these sort of steps, which they may,
Secret Service will insist upon it in some areas.
I'm sure, but it doesn't matter, because then they're going to go into those areas anyway, and then they're going to say, "Excuse me, I heard Jeanine Pirro on television telling me this."
It's the whole thing.
Well, but Andrew, what I thought you were going to go to was what it suggests is that all the places in the city that have the worst violent crime, it's going to be fine to carry to carry AR-15s around. Essentially saying, well, we got to protect our elected officials, so we'll have these zones where you can't have open carry. But in Southeast, in Northeast, in Southwest, you'll be able to have you just walk around brandishing your AR-15, which essentially makes clear that there's a different value for different kinds of life in Washington, D.C. Let's put it that way. Also, does this not put the lie to the notion that what the federal takeover of policing in Washington, D.C. is not about crime? It's about this other thing. If you were really focused on trying to prevent violent crime and bring the violent crime rate down in Washington, you would not let Jeanine Pirro do what she's doing, and Donald Trump has that within his control.
President of Brady United Against Gun Violence, Chris Brown, thank you so much for coming on the show this morning.
Thank you.